Well, hello and welcome to the Alpha Software Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software. Today we're going to be talking about working with charts and charting and graphing data on the screen. If you're familiar with the Alpha Anywhere test drive application, one of the screens on there is a chart. It's a rather lame one, to be honest with you. It's just a static data chart. I think it shows you pet adoptions in Kentucky or something like that. But it was meant to serve as an example or a placeholder so that you could put in a real dashboard. We often get questions about charts and about graphing, and it's no surprise because we have lots of different types of charts and graphing. And today we are going to be taking a look at one of them as well as an overview of all of them. So can't wait to get started on that. Also, if there are any questions, you could type them into the questions box or into the chat window of the GoToWebinar control panel. So let's get started. So when it comes to working with charts, and we're talking about charts that you're going to put in a UX control that you're going to display on the screen. Although in many cases, the technologies and stuff that we have here will work the same when you're putting charts into a report. But here we're talking about on-screen charts. The first one, and the one that we're going to talk about most today, is simply called the chart control. The chart control is a server-side technology, meaning that you have to be connected to the internet for it to work. But it uses the Microsoft.NET libraries, and it produces a lot of nice looking charts, and we've made it fairly simple to set them up. We've built an interface for you to make that process easier. There's also a couple other kinds of charts that are built into Alpha Anywhere or are connected to Alpha Anywhere out of the box. There are two types of JavaScript, well, really three types of JavaScript chart controls, but there are two types that are used for generating SVG type charts. One is called rgraph, and the other is the Alpha Anywhere SVG chart control. Of these two, the Alpha Anywhere one is the newer of the two, although rgraph is still supported. The nice thing about these types of charts, these JavaScript charts, and even Google chart, which is also a type of JavaScript chart, is that they are responsive so that you can use them to drill down on data. Sometimes this is useful for dashboards, but sometimes just taking a look at the data is sufficient. And today that's all we're going to really be going over. So if you are interested, though, in the other kinds of dashboards, for example, this one for the JavaScript control, I've actually copied out the link to the documentation for this one here. I'm going to go ahead and paste that into the chat window so that you have it for when the when our session is over. And this one is for using the rgraph JavaScript chart control. Actually, this one's for using both rgraph and the Alpha Anywhere one. As it turns out, we had also done a webinar a few years back about using the Alpha Anywhere SVG charts, and I'm going to give you a link to that. It's on YouTube, and I'm going to also put that here in the chat window. Send that right along. And then last but not least, there is Google Charts. Google Charts is pretty cool. It's a Google Chart API, but the API is in JavaScript. So it's actually brought down to the client. So you don't need to have a server connection, unless, of course, you're retrieving data from the server that you need to use in the chart. In many cases, though, you're going to be connected to the internet anyway. So that's not always a huge deal, but the Google Charts give you lots of cool design ideas, a lot of cool chart styles and things like that. So I'd be remiss to leave those out. So I've pasted that into the chat window right here as well. But today we're just going to be taking a look at the plain old everyday chart control that comes with Alpha Anywhere. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to pop over to my Windows machine and we will take a look here at my chart. In fact, we will start right from, I want to save this. I don't know if I made any changes, so I'm going to say no. Let's start from a new UX control. So I'm going to say new web control, and I'm using web component, and I'm going to say UX. Okay, we'll just start with a blank one. And the first thing that I always do is just to remind me what I'm doing is I'll just put a piece of static text up here at the top. So we'll say other controls, static text, and this we're just going to say chart. Okay, so now we have a UX control with one control on it, and because I have one control on it, I'm now allowed to name it. So I'm going to call it chart 2, and there it is. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to add a chart. And to do that, we're just going to go to add controls, and we're going to type in chart, and we're going to find two different options. One is chart, the other is JavaScript chart. We're going to do the chart one today. So there's chart. We're just going to click OK, and our chart has been inserted. We haven't defined it in any way. If we go into working preview, it really shouldn't show us anything. It should just probably just be blank. Yeah, but there's a little area here where you can see where it's going to be. Okay, so how do you set up a chart? Well, once you have the chart inserted as a control on the UX, you can double click on that chart control. And the first thing you want to do is choose the type of chart. Today, we're going to be working with a chart that's got multiple sets of data in it because I have a data set of temperature and humidity that I've collected over the period of a month from my greenhouse, as it turns out, in real life. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to choose an XY sort of stacked, no, actually grouped XY bar, vertical grouped. It's going to give me an example of what one might look like just using the sample data that's built in there. So there it is. So now the first thing we're going to decide is what do we want to have go along the x-axis and what do we want to have go along the y-axis. So the y-axis is going to be our values of temperature and humidity. The x-axis are going to be our dates. So when we're setting this up, we have to tell it what kind of data we're going to use for each of the axes. So for the data type, I'm not going to use numeric, I'm going to use date. Now I could also use time because as you'll see in a moment, my data does have both time and data values in it. But we're going to use date because it makes for a nicer looking graph. I'd like to have everything summarized. It'd be a little bit too granular if I went to time. As it turns out, I've been collecting data in every hour for 24 hours times 30 days. So it would be a lot of plots that I don't want to see. The next type is the data type, and that's going to be numeric, so that's fine. And so then the next question it's going to ask is, okay, what is the data that you want to put into X and what you want to put into Y? If you click on that, it's going to say, that's cool. What data series do you want to include? And you can actually create a data series here, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to just click OK for now. That's fine. Data expression's empty. Whoops. Doesn't like me closing like that. Okay, I'm just going to cancel. No problem. And we're going to go into the properties for this UX, and we're going to take a look for a property called data series. Now, a data series is a collection of different groups, like tables of data, if you can think of it that way. That is accessible to the UX control. And one of the places that you'll use it is when you're doing charting, but there are other places that you can use it as well. So when you define a data series, that data series can either use static data or it can use dynamic data taken, say, from SQL or something like that. So for this data series, I'm going to click here because I want to define one. And I'm going to click Add a Data Series. So I'm going to click Add Data Series right here, and we're going to call this the greenhouse data series. Okay. And it said to me that it's been created, but there's no data in it yet. So I need to edit the definition for it and tell it where the data is coming from. So I'm going to click on Edit Series Definition right here. And like I said, I could use SQL. You know, I could use a connection string, or I could use an old DBF file, I guess. I wouldn't recommend that for web applications, but you could definitely use SQL. You could also do your own custom JavaScript or XBasic to generate that data. But today we're just going to use static data. So here in static data, I'm going to click the button to define the data that we want to use. And here is a few examples. So if you have just data that's just one piece of data, one item of data, one datum, I guess, per line, that is considered to be a series that doesn't have any sub-series in it. What we have actually does have some subseries. Let's take a look here in my notepad where I've collected my data. And you'll see up at the tippity top where I've got my field names that I have, come on, let's scroll to the top. There we go. That I have 3 fields. One's called timestamp, one's called temperature, and one is called humidity. So that each one of these timestamps, I've taken a measure of the temperature and the humidity, and this is in Fahrenheit, just in case you're curious. Now, I've done this as a pipe delimited file. It came from the Internet of Things device, which, by the way, was called Govee. It's something I happen to recommend and like. Not very expensive. You can get them on Amazon or something like that. These little temperature sensors are battery operated. They'll connect to Wi-Fi. They'll connect to Bluetooth, and they will report back data frequently to a server, which collects it, and then you can go and download that data. That's what I did. I got it as a CSV file, but I did a quick search and replace in Notepad where I replaced the commas with the pipe symbol because that is the format that we use here in Alpha when setting this up. All right, hopefully I didn't over-explain that. Let me go ahead and copy this data, and I'm going to put this here in static choices. And so I've now pasted in data with 3 subseries. Series 1 is the date, Series 2 is the temperature, and Series 3 is the humidity. We're going to go ahead and click OK on that now. You'll see that this is lit up green to indicate that it now has got data in it. Timestamp, temperature, and humidity are my 3 subseries. Okay, that's all in place. I'm going to go ahead and click Save. I have the ability, if I wanted to publish this data to the client side so that I could access it offline. But the type of charting that I'm going to use requires a server-side callback anyway, so there's really no point in doing that. So I'm going to just leave that alone. All right, we're going to go back into controls. Let's take a look at our chart. We've said that the data type, I guess we have to start again here, but the chart type that we want is going to be that that grouped XY bar. And the type for the x-axis, this is going to be the date data, so I'm going to choose date. And then for the y type, this is going to be numeric, so that is correct. So here we are for the x over here. This is where we're going to specify what field holds our time values. So I'm going to click here, and it's going to say, okay, go ahead and add a data series. So now we've got a data series set up. I'm going to click Add. I'm going to select the greenhouse one, click OK, and this dialog box appears asking me which of the 3 fields I'd like to use. I'm going to use the timestamp one. So we'll go ahead and click OK on timestamp. And there's an example for the data series just to make sure that that's good. And then the last thing I want to do is just give this a label, and I'm just going to call that label date. I'm going to click OK. And so now I've defined my x-axis. Now I need to define my y-axis. I'm actually going to do that twice because I've got 2 data series or 2 subseries. So I'm going to add this data series. Sorry, I'm going to select this data series, click OK, and I'm going to say temperature is going to be the first one. I'm going to click Add OK, make sure that's still selected, click OK, and this time I'm going to choose humidity. So now I have 2 things selected here. I've got temperature, I've got humidity. I'm going to click OK. And there we go. So now I should be able to preview this, but there's one thing I want to just take a look at. Down here under Chart Style, you're going to see a Smart button here for Chart Style. And I want to change the data series. I want to make sure, I didn't like the default color. So I'm going to say for Series 1, instead of blue, let's make that like, I don't know, purple, violets, plum. Let's go with plum. And for data series 2, that's the one that holds the humidity. Ooh, the orange. I kind of like the orange, but let's go with something different anyway. Let's go with dark yellow. That almost looks like olive green to me, but that's good. I'm going to click OK. And we're going to click OK again. Go ahead and save that. And let's go ahead and see what our chart looks like. Make sure I set up everything correctly. And there we go. Now look at these. These are really clumped really tightly together here, so you can't really make out one for the other. I think I want to widen this a bit. Now, the thing about charts, these kinds of charts, is that you can't give them and this is sort of a limitation, but you can't give them a percentage value. So you kind of want to know, this is why they're great for desktop applications where you know you can count on a certain amount of space. So for a chart width, I don't know, let's give it like 900 pixels. And then I'm going to go ahead and click Working Preview. I should see a nicer chart definition. Once I really do click Working Preview, here we go. And now this should be more spread out. Here we go. You'll see if you look really closely, it might be hard to see on the webinar, but there are these little notches here. I think these actually indicate the data points that were used when creating this particular bar. Because if you recall, each one of these days actually has got 24 data elements associated with it. I tried showing it the other way so I could see each hour, and it just kind of becomes ridiculous. So that's it. Okay, so let's take a look. That's actually kind of what I wanted to cover today for simple charts. That's it. But just a quick review of some of the things. When you're setting up one of these charts, keep in mind it's going to be server side. You can do JavaScript ones, and we will cover those in future webinars. When you add a control, that's how you choose between chart, which is server side, or JavaScript chart, which can be client side. Within the chart itself, you can select from a group of different ones. These are ones that are created again by the Microsoft.NET framework. They're just built in. You set up your X and Y axes, and then you set up your data series. You do that in properties, search for data series. And again, your data series can be static, or they can be SQL-based, or they can be custom. So that is about it. Do check out these. In fact, I want to click on a couple of these links right here to show you what's in them. Let's try, that's not chart control. Let's try this one, the servers. Yeah, go to this one first. How to add a Google chart to a UX component. That's a good one. Add a chart to a UX. So all of these things here under the how-to section in our documentation, I strongly recommend. They do come with videos, and they come with sample components. And in fact, one of the sample components, and I know I'm getting ahead of myself because I will cover Google Charts in a future one, but one of the sample UXs, let me close this and save it, when you build a new one, is a Google chart example, which I think is particularly strong. So I'm going to click New. I'm going to choose Web Component. I'm going to choose UX and client-side charting, Google Charts. And that gives you, I think, a very good example of all different types of Google Charts that you can use. There are even buttons here that let you switch between them. This is a little bit more complicated because it is more coding intensive, but I'll show you how to do it. It won't be that bad. All right, so let me go take a look into the questions box, see if there's any questions on today's subject, or see if there are any other just general Alpha Anywhere questions I might be able to answer. But again, if I can't, go ahead and send any questions you might have to guides, guides@alphasoftware.com. So that looks like that is it. Wonderful. Hey, thank you very much, everyone, for showing up today. Appreciate having you. And I look forward to seeing you at our next Wednesday webinar. Until then, take care and stay well. Bye-bye.